So in this lesson, we're going to be setting up the endpoint, and what the endpoint is going to do is it's a Google Apps script. So it's going to track information into the spreadsheet, so the email, the user, and the message, as well as it's going to send us out an email to our email account with the parameters from the input form. So let's go ahead and send it. So notice we are on the local machine. We hit send. The content that we're sending over gets deposited into the spreadsheet. We also get indication that the message has been sent. Go over to the inbox. Within the inbox, there's our message that was coming from the web form. So any changes to the content here will also be sent over, and that will send another message over to our email address. So you could use this as a way to have a quick contact form on your website. So let's create the endpoint for this. For this lesson, you are going to need to have a Google account. So you can just use a Gmail account or a Google account. And we're going to be selecting the data and returning it back and actually sending an email. And this is all going to be done with the backend code on Google Apps Script. So if you're not familiar with Google Apps Script, this is similar to code to JavaScript. Essentially, it's the same as JavaScript with a bunch of custom methods that allow you to connect Calendar, Docs, Drive, Gmail, Sheets, Slides, and all of your favorite Google apps together to do some really pretty cool functionality. So it's modern JavaScript platform in the cloud. The IDE is on the cloud as well. So in order to access it, all you need is a Google account. So you can also access it with the free accounts. There's two different types of scripts to create. There's standalone and bound scripts. So we are going to be creating a bound script within the spreadsheet. In addition, you can also find out more information about Google Apps Script at developers.google.com/appscript, and we are going to primarily be using the mail function in order to send the email and track the information that's being submitted using the post request to our web app endpoint. So let's get started. Open up your Google Drive, and from there you can select New, and from the drop-down menu, I'm selecting New Sheets. So that's creating a brand new sheet object. And you can access Apps Script from Sheets, from Docs, from Slides, and I'll show you how to do that. So this is, give it a name, contact info. And so this is just going to be depositing some of the contact form requests into the spreadsheet, and I'll show you how to do that as well and send it as an email. And then once you've given it a name, you don't have to actually do anything else. You can go to Tools, and under Script Editor, this is going to open up the online editor where we can write our Google Apps script. And with the Google Apps script, so I'll just give this project a name as well. And this is going to be Contact Tester. And there's also, if you want to go to script.google.com/home, so that's the home, and that will list out all of the Google scripts that you currently have. So there are some default functions within Google Apps Script, and one of them is to deploy a web app. So it uses a custom function, and the function that generates the web app is called doGet, and you can pass in your event parameters there. So they're the same thing as what you would expect with JavaScript, where we create functions, and then these functions run the code blocks and produce the functionality within Google Apps Script. And there's a few different methods with Google Apps Script. So one of them to log out content, you can do logger log, and that will log out content into the log. So when we do run the script, in order to run the script, there's a run the selected function option here in the navigation menu. And then from the drop-down list, you can select the function that you want to run. So once we run the function, the execution log will pop up. And for right now, it just will have the logger and the logging information. And this is going to actually function the same way as the console log. So now with the newer version, you can also do console log. So we're outputting the value of hello into the log. And let's construct some content. So this is just some test content, And then there's a number of services, and the one that we want to use is the content service. So this one can create text output, and this is also where we can create the output, the JSON output. And let's create a temporary object. Now you don't have to do this. This is just to demonstrate how Google Apps Script is going to handle the content that's coming in. So we might have a number of pieces of content within the object and within the parameters. So parameter, and then this can have a value of test or something like that. So if we want to output the object information, you can use the JSON stringify, same as JavaScript, in order to stringify the object. And I'll just do the console log, and you could also do the logger log. So this is what we're actually going to be outputting. So run that one more time. And so now we've got the stringified object. And this is actually what we want to output back to the page. So we want to take the contents of the event object that's being passed in to the doGet function and stringify that. We're going to log it out as output. And then we're going to be returning that information back to the user for the web page. And it's expecting the doGet when it runs the web app. It does have a return function. So you can return content. And in this case, we're going to be returning back the object that's created by content service, create text output, and the text output that we want to create is going to be within output. So having done all of that, you can also shorten this just to do a return of the content service text output JSON stringify e parameter. So I'll add that in. The most important part is that you're returning something for this, and that as well you've got some type of content that you're constructing using the different methods that are available to create the output. So this one statement is actually all we need, but I'll keep this stuff in here so that we can take a closer look at it. If we want to debug it, we can debug it. So now in order to create the web app, the next step is once you've got the doGet function, and this is the most important part because without this, you're not going to have a web app. And then also make sure that you're returning content. If you're not returning content, it'll throw an error and it'll ask you to return some content. So the top right-hand side, there's a blue button, and that is the deployment button. So this will give you select the type of deployment, and we want to create a web app. So this is the contact tester. And select the app that you want to execute as. And since we do want to send an email, you need to execute it as whatever Google account. So in this case, we're going to be sending the email from my account over to wherever we're specifying. So the email is going to be originating. So this is the same thing that you would do with any backend code where you need to send the email from the server. So you need to have the server mail client set up. So setting up the account is going to also provide the permissions for it. And then who has access to it. And we do want to have this open, so we can set this up and just leave it to anyone. So deploying the new deployment is going to construct an endpoint for us. So this is the endpoint, executable endpoint, and I know it's fairly long. You can copy this content, and it's also got a deployment ID and so on. So once you've copied the URL, you've actually deployed the application. And now you can go to that endpoint and you're going to see some output here. So right now we haven't passed in any parameters into the string. If we do something like ID equals 100 and test equals tester, it will output those as parameters. So this is where we can pick up using the get method. So if we are using get, we're sending this information over to the server within the request parameters. And if we go into the execution log, we're not actually logging out the content that is logged out when we're making the request. So it does make it a little bit hard to debug where we can't just launch the function to do the debug. So just keep that in mind. So the endpoint is going to be actually the same. So open up the web application, and I'm going to update the URL to be the new executable endpoint URL. And right now, it's still going to throw an error because it doesn't have a post, and we're trying to post to somewhere where there's no do post. So if you do run into the CORS error, this typically with Google Apps Script is going to be an error with the script itself. So let's update, and we'll add in the do post method. And what do post does is the same as do get, but it picks up any post method requests to the server. And we can also do the same where we're outputting and returning back the contents. Every time you do make some updates to it, we want to make sure that we redeploy the application, as otherwise the properties won't be updated. So this is version 2, and just do a deploy of it. Same web URL, so you can copy it here at this point. And if you ever do need to get the web URL, you can always go over to deploy, manage deployments, and from here you can pick up the web app URL as well. And you can change the permissions, and then you could redeploy it. So let's try that one more time. Go back to our application and hit send. And this time we're actually getting back the post data. So we're successfully able to send our post data over to the server side. So now it's a matter of picking up that post data within the Google side so we can parse the contents. And this is within the post data, within the event parameter, the post data contents. And all it's doing is it's just returning back whatever we're sending through. So you can update these values, do a send, and it's going to send the content, and then it's also going to return it back. So this is the part that we're looking for, is within the post data, and we want to return back just the post data to the user. So go back into the script editor, and let's create a JavaScript object, so JSON, and I'll add some spaces to move it up. So using JSON parse, so just as we would with JavaScript, we can take the post data contents. So the same that we saw within the request parameters that we're returning back. So we can parse it, and that's going to allow us to once again use it as an object. So if we only want to return back the actual object data that we're sending over, so now we can use it, we can get the various values, so we can get the email and so on, and we can use it within the Google Apps Script code. So just did another update to it, and now let's set this as v3 for our application, redeploy it. And now when I make a request to the endpoint, so I can clear it, and you don't have to refresh because this is a client-side code. So we're getting exactly the object back, and that means that we can also use this object within our script. So going back once again to the script, let's add the content into our spreadsheet. So with the spreadsheets, once it's connected, every Google document will have its own unique ID. Easiest way to get the ID is to go within the web URL. So let's take the contents there. And this is also how you can create a log and so on, adding content into the spreadsheet. So we're going to select the spreadsheet, and there is a class for that. So that's the spreadsheet app. And here we want to get, so we can get the active spreadsheet because we are connected to it with the bound script, or we can also open by ID. And usually I do prefer to open by ID. So let's create another variable name, and that's just going to be the ID. So open by ID. So we specify the ID of the object, and that's going to be the spreadsheet. And to get the sheet itself, now that we've got a spreadsheet object, we can get sheet by name. So let's select the sheet, and we've got it as sheet 1. So that will select the sheet object for us. And then for the sheet itself, we can append a row of content to it. And now that we've got content within the JSON object, if we want to turn this JSON object into an array, or for now what we can do is we can just track the contents in. So let's redeploy it because we've made changes to it. Web app, and select it, and we'll do version 4. So redeploy it. And we're going to have to accept permissions, so authorizing the web app. And that's authorizing it to access the spreadsheet itself. And then under the Advanced tab, you can see the permissions that are going to be provided. Also, at any point, you can go to myaccount.google.com/permissions to remove the permissions that you've added for any web app. And that's under the link here where we've got the Google account. So selecting allow to allow the authorization, and then done. And let's go back. And now whenever we're sending the data, we're actually depositing it into the spreadsheet. And that's all being done with the Google script. So let's minimize this and show you, and just sometimes it's good as well to test it out just to make sure things are working. So now that we've got this content, we can separate it out because this is an object within the spreadsheets. So we can separate out the content into different columns if we wanted to, or if this is okay, we can also just track it directly. And as well, you can also take the data apart and apply conditions on it before you send the actual email. So in this case, we're just going to keep it fairly simple, and we'll check to see if the email will get the contents out. And we've got that within a JSON object. So the email value is going to be JSON, and that's contained within the email. There's the user, and that's contained within the JSON user value. And then the message is going to be contained within the JSON, and that's contained within the JSON message object. So that's actually just going to separate out the values. And then we can also do this as an array now that we've separated the content. So this is just one way that we can get all of the post content. And each array within the array, that's going to be a new line. So we can just do email, user, and message if we want to track that information back, and redeploy it. So creating a new version. I think we're on probably version 5. And of course, for your real application, put actual real values into the names. So just click, and now we've got the email, we've got the name, and we've got that content. So we can delete the rows. We can actually insert one row above, and then use this as our kind of like a tracking email. So whenever any content comes in, and let's reset it, so we can track the information into the spreadsheet. So it's always going to drop it into the spreadsheet. And now last, but of course not least, is to send the email. So also, because this is JavaScript in the cloud, I can use the same function where I'm validating an email. So I can just copy and paste the function over here, and I can check to see if it's a valid email and so on. So we'll do our conditions. And right now valid is true. And we'll do our condition if, and we'll validate the email address. So if it's not a valid email, so if it is a valid email, then we just keep it true. And if this comes back as false, so do negate it. And then here we can update the value of valid and set that to false. And you can have any conditions on any of these, just as we did with JavaScript. So before you actually add it, we can have the condition. And then if we want to append it to the spreadsheet, here we can append to the spreadsheet and check to see if valid. And if it is, then we run this code. And I'll also append the valid here. And then this would just be the same thing. So this is whatever code you want to run. So we'll actually append 2 rows for every submission. And this is just if you want to have a condition on it. So let's try that again and get our spreadsheet on screen, send the message. So it's coming back true. And actually it's not going to let us submit if it's not a valid email. But if it did, then we could also catch it on the server side as well. So that's another option. And if you are sending an email, generally it's good to make sure it is a valid email. If it's not something that, if you just want to get the messages no matter what, you can just simply send over the message information. So that's going to be the last part here. And actually it's really easy to send a message with AppScript. So let's create a function. I'll just call it mailer. And this is going to take the user information. So email user and message in. So email user and message. And we'll send it over. So if it is valid, so if valid is okay, then we'll send a message. So it'll just type into the tracking the spreadsheet that we sent the message. So within the mailer, there's a function that sends mail, and that's the mail app service within AppScript. And to send the email, that's the send email. And then within the email, you've got a number of parameters that you can add in. So this is going to be within an object format. So to, and where we're sending the email to. And generally this will be my email address. So I want to receive all of the emails. And this is the email address that you want to send the email to. And there's also the subject. So whatever you want as the subject, and that should actually be colon, JavaScript object format from web form. And then for the body, so that's under HTML body. And with here, this is where you can construct the body contents that you want. So you can do from name and then add in the JSON name, or actually it's JSON user, and then construct whatever information you want, email, and then add the JSON email, and then the message, and add the JSON message. So that will send the email. So you can customize this however you want. This is going to be in HTML, so you can just add in the line breaks. And there we go. And it's actually not passing in the JSON information, and we can just use the values that were actually passed in. So that was why it was throwing the error there. And just save that. You can do the save. And let's deploy it for the last time. So now we've got our final code. So that's the final version already. We need to authorize it to use the mail service. So again, we're going to just authorize it on the email account that I've been using to create it. So under advanced, and then go to contact tester. So it just shows you the application name. So that's the same name as the deployment. And the AppScript project name. And it tells you the permissions that we're accepting. So there's the sheets, there's the email. So I'm okay with it, hit allow. And same endpoint URL. So go back into the JavaScript. And within the Google email, whenever you accept permissions, it'll give you a quick alert there about the permissions. So now let's refresh and click send. And it looks like we threw an error there. So let's do some quick troubleshooting. And this is the best way to troubleshoot. Just create a function to simulate the content that you're sending over. And then you can select and run the test function. And it looks like the email address is not valid. And I'm not sure what happened there. So it didn't have an email address that it could send to. So let's run the tester one more time. So that looked like it sent OK. You can check your inbox. Just make sure that you were able to send the email. And it's actually, I've got an S there at the end. So before we redeploy it, run the tester function just to make sure that it's running OK. And let's try that one more time. So that time it sent an email address without the S. So there's our content being sent. So now we're ready to do another deployment and final, and I'll just call it final. So hopefully this will work properly and we don't have any issues, and then we can send the email from the content from the form. So let's clear that and hit send and go to our email. And now we've got the content coming from the local host, and that's being sent to our email address, so that we've got some content that's been filled out there. In addition, we're also adding it to the spreadsheet. So you can either copy the Google Apps Script code that I was using or create your own version. And you're gonna just make sure that you have the endpoint set up, and you're gonna be ready to move on to the last lesson where we're gonna finalize the application. Tasks for this lesson are log into your Google account, create the new sheet doc, access the script editor from within the sheet. So that can be done under the tools, and then go down to the script editor. That will open up your Google Apps Script ID, online ID, and from there you can start writing scripts. So create the do post function, and that's the default function for the post method to the web app endpoint, and then get the contents that are being passed in. So the post data using the ePost data get content or contents object property, and parse that back into a usable JavaScript object that then you can deconstruct and use within the Google script. You can append a row to the spreadsheet by using the add row method and using the spreadsheet app service, and also send an email using mail app services using the send email function available within the mail app, and send the post data over to your email address. And then finalize, deploy your endpoint, and use that endpoint within your local machine when you're doing testing to make sure that you're able to send data over to the endpoint, and also that you've got the emails that are coming in properly to your account.